Do we have stragglers, or what is the story here?
People are already left for the airport.
Aha. All right, then. Well, given that, Brother Fred, you care to commence with the corporal punishment?
Sure. Somebody bring the nails.
Yeah.
So what will happen is you're going to be getting individual comments from everybody, and you'll get a written version of what I'm about to say in addition. So first of all, everybody felt that this was a very, very good meeting. Virtually all of the talks were quite solid.
Good.
And the idea of our having slides before the presentation was appreciated, was effective. It helped. There was a lot of talk about having Brian, Jim Ashton come to the meeting.
Brian Arbogast?
Have people of that level, and we would like to encourage, if not institutionalize, something like that. The dialogue is, if you will, two ways. Obviously, they heard whatever they heard when we asked questions, especially in the case of Jim, but also it was very informative for the board to hear the way they're thinking about things and to get that pushback. So we'd like to see what we can do to make that happen more often.
That level, that is to say, at least Corporate VP to at least be in attendance? Or is it specifically Brian and Jim that we're talking about?
Jim is the one that was the real eye-opener for us.
Yeah.
I mean, there's a sense that, and we asked for this, he doesn't put security and privacy at the top of the list. I mean, most people don't put privacy at the top of the list of the people that get paraded in front of us. And there's a sense in which that's a bad idea these days. But it's clear that Olchin doesn't even put security close to the top of the list, despite what he says. You see it from his behavior. And the more we get exposed to people who are making the decisions and understand their values, the more likely we are to be able to make comments that are tempered by the reality of business decisions. I personally think that, and I've said this before, that if Olchin had sat through the red-green presentation, he had to sit through it at some point. But if he had sat through it with us and heard our questions, he would have had a useful hour and a half to learn. It would have saved him an hour and a half worth of thinking elsewhere, and so it needn't be a time sink.
Right.
But I don't think we should make an argument that says there should always be the
Corporate VP
level present. That we're never going to get them, and most of the presentations we have aren't really worth their time. It's just some of them are, and we have to figure out which ones are going to be and make sure we get to meet with them. And if not in the context of a presentation, then having a 45-minute slot, just the way we have this slot with you, might be a worthwhile way to have a discussion. We would like for you to procure the security architecture document when it is available and send it around. There's a sense in which waiting until March, our next meeting, to discuss it would
be too late.
A mistake.
Okay.
There are a bunch of topics that came up that might be candidates for our next meeting. We don't understand how you do privacy testing. Some people say it's done really well, it's a piece of cake, and we've heard some people say the opposite. We have to get to the bottom of that. We would like to have a presentation and discussion of the security architecture. As you know, we were supposed to have one yesterday, and we didn't. And whether you can figure out why that happened or not, we should have one.
So would that be, in this case, Steve or Butler? Are you looking for that level?
If Dan isn't up to giving it, then I guess it needs to be Steve or Butler.
No, it could be Paul Leach, I suppose.
Well, I mean, generally, architect level, you know.
One of the people on the task force who has the clout to say what the task force meant. I don't know who else is on. Steve brought up the role of common criterion. Some people did want to talk a bit about that. And I guess there's a more general issue about Microsoft's role in government security and evolving government standards. Steve knows what I'm alluding to. There is a strong feeling that the identity management people ought to come back, the IdentiCard stuff. There's a sense in which we don't think they understand the social and legal consequences of, quote, just plumbing, which they purport to be putting out. And that needs to be discussed. There's a concern by the board that the status of privacy needs to be raised in general in the company. It's
across the board.
Across the board. And that is not a concern of the privacy members of the board. It's a concern of the whole board.
Okay.
That it's noticeable to everyone. The board has strong feelings about the red-green business. There are clearly at least two issues. One is the UI issue, and we want to urge Microsoft to explore that and understand what makes sense. It's not clear to us that the bury the distinction is a good idea. The other is how you implement isolation, and there's a strong feeling that virtual machines are the better way to make an investment and get a payoff. And third, there's this, we think the TCO question is going to be an important factor in sorting out which of the, within Windows or using virtual machines, is more sensible, and that needs to be studied, and we'd like to have a presentation on those issues.
Okay.
It's clear to us that Microsoft took our advice and decided to start talking about architecture, and now they don't seem to know what architecture is.
Or they have many meanings.
There are many meanings, and we know. So this is in the criticisms department. I don't know how to fix it, but it's really clear that the next step is getting to the point where people can distinguish between minor restructurings of code, architecture, compliance. They're not all the same. One of the things we learned from having Olchin talk to us is that it's interesting to have a contrarian view presented to us. In 3 years, our mode of operation is somebody gets put in the front of the room, and the contrarians are sitting around the table. So Olchin is a contrarian with regard to, say, the red-green approach. There are probably senior people and very junior people who have refreshing views about things that are being pushed. And it might be instructive when we look at a topic if we could identify an effective proponent of the opposite and hear from them as well, because it would inform our views, and it would mean that we're not reinventing wheels and we're not missing things. And our contribution is really adding value to statements rather than inventing all the statements. So we should look about that. And some of the candidates are the whole threat modeling vision. We've only heard from the proponents. SDL, is it working, or is it mindless form filling out? We've only heard from the proponents. Red-green obviously was an example of that. So the identity.
Echoes of Greg Morissette in those comments there somewhere. Yeah.
He wasn't the only one.
Oh, I know, but he and I were having this conversation just before we got the boot. So yeah.
So the last thing is, you're going to hear lots of stuff about the identity card stuff, but there's this general feeling that it's way too flexible, that there's not a good understanding of the user community. There's not an understanding of the hardware realization issues, the difference between a cell phone and a smart card, and that there's a bunch of problems that are raised at the beginning of the talk that this is supposed to solve. And then in the end, it doesn't solve them. And password fatigue is the example that comes to mind. It's possible with this flexibility to only have twice as many passwords. And then when one puts them up against the wall, the line is, well, we're just building the plumbing. And they're clearly not just building the plumbing, and the plumbing has all these consequences. So this is, I guess, this and the red-green thing are the two technical things we heard about that we think there's a lot more discussion that ought to happen before that audit.
Well, that was entirely the reason why we fronted those talks early in the cycle, because at this point we'll take the feedback and
Right. And that's the end of this set of general comments.
okay. Were there any other comments or questions or things that weren't that are outside of Fred's commentary here that someone wants to get across or beat me up over or beat Steve up over? Or?
I might be able to
take issue with just one point that Fred made. I think the identity is going to have to be flexible because I think there's a lot of different kinds of people out there to authenticate. So if he said that it was too flexible, I think it might need to be really, really flexible to meet the different kinds of people that we want to have be able to be authenticated. So I'm not sure I agree with that.
Well, the flexibility I think is in different places, yeah.
I think we all agree that the places of flexibility is controversial and it needs to get sorted out.
Yep.
And
so does that mean 6 months from now we should be hearing from the InfoCard guys again, post feedback here to see if things have improved, or I mean, is there any sort of?
They say they're working on the plumbing, and there are some of us who were interested in seeing what the plumbing, a little bit more about the plumbing, and not me particularly. I think we all said that we'd like to see them again in 6 months. So I think both.
Or when there's something new.
I don't know if there needs to be something new, actually.
No, but we don't want to hear about more plumbing.
You don't want to hear the same thing. What you want to do is you want to see if there's any sort of crystallization of thought that's happened since then, whether it's going the right direction.
In response to our feedback.
Right.
That's really important.
But they've done some user tests as well. Markets.
And I think, and definitely, I mean, it was in Fred's comments, but there was a thread that kind of went throughout, which was this user interface issue. You know, whether it was in the whole presentation dealing with phishing, the presentation about identity documents, and the need for real user testing and real thinking about the user population, and that's not just it's an integral component of security and privacy, because if the interfaces aren't right, all the work is useless.
Steve, is there any value to having any of the usability folks coming over here and talk? I mean, Push Nodder would have been perfect to bring over to talk to us.
I think so. I actually think you guys missed a fourth or fifth pillar, and that is usability. It's reliability, security, privacy, and usability, and then the business integrity. And I think I have missed that. It's no wonder we continue to pick on this in an individual way, but elevate it because it's a trade-off. It's always going to be these trade-offs. So I agree. I think we should have some usability people come in, even if we know how it is that you do user testing.
Sir.
Also in the InfoCard presentation, it kind of started off.
Dave, if you have to hit the brakes, go for it. Seriously.
The cab is in here.
Oh, okay.
It started off with kind of the presenter saying we've done this 60 times, and we're so happy to hear it again. And then kind of as we drilled down into it and got into the actual mock-up of the cards, I think the claim was made that, oh no, this is very misleading because it won't really be a Bank of America card, which was a concern that some of us had. Namely, you're going to have like 60 or 80 cards, some of which are physical, so it's not an improvement. And so then the person said, oh no, this is very misleading, and this is just the people who did the graphics. And so, well, then kind of the reply is then,
well, it might have just been a bad presentation. Sorry.
Okay.
But yeah, I think it was bad enough we want to see a follow-up. Right?
Yeah, and also it should be then whatever the cards are that reflect.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. They were looking kind of permanent.
Okay.
That reflect, you know, what the kind of paradigm is.
didn't respond.
Poker face.
All right. Yeah. So we'll have. Needless to say, the notion of usability is not one that's forgotten. It's probably the. Admittedly, in many cases, it's de-emphasized in the face of other more pressing issues. But at the end of the day, it's something that needs to be elevated. I would agree with that.
Especially when you guys talk about user experience so much.
Right.
It's
right. So we'll sniff around a bit and find out It would have been good to have Chris Nodder. Chris Nodder was one of the guys who was working on a lot of the UI security work in Longhorn, and he split, went to another company. But yeah, we'll see what we can come up with and get some usability folks up here. Any other questions, comments, thoughts?
The floor is yours.
The floor is mine. All right. Well, let's just go ahead and cut to the chase, shall we? Yeah. Okay. The board membership, as if you didn't know that was what I was talking about. Let me say this. I sort of alluded to it a little bit earlier that due to circumstances beyond our control, we haven't had a chance to sit down and really think about it since we had our conference call a couple weeks prior to the meeting to sort of flesh these issues out. But there are a series of statements that I can make about board membership that are definitive, and I don't think anyone would, on our side, is going to argue about it. Number one, if we're going to make changes and if we're bringing people onto the board or things of that nature, the capability and quality of the people that will be brought on the board will not be compromised in any way. That is to say, we're not going to bring any shills on. We're not going to bring anyone that's going to wind up being on the board as a result of anything other than their ability to contribute. So, I mean, that's the first and foremost thing. And when Scott and Steve and I were talking about this these many years ago, I mean, that was a primary motivation then, and it remains a primary motivation now. Given that, we will probably wind up tightening up some of the criteria a little bit. We have, there's a few things with regards to attendance and stuff like that we can probably do to, in some cases, self-select. As all of you know, we extended an invite to Dawson Engler and and I never heard hide nor hair. So obviously those types of situations will wind up being more of, I would expect in this case, a contractual type of function here. That is to say, obviously if your son or daughter's getting married, or something that is truly of import, then it's no big deal. But if it's something where you're just not showing up because you don't want to show up, or if you're showing up and you're basically just marking time or something of that nature, it's of no use to you guys. I mean, we're wasting your time, and vice versa. So those types of analyses will probably go forward in terms of how we think about how to fill out the board next time around. So given that, there are still going to be we need to do some degree of redistribution in terms of geographical. I mean, I tread down this road lightly, but there are still things about particular infrastructure issues in Asia and elsewhere that we need to be cognizant of. And as a result, we will be looking for folks that can advise us accordingly. Again, though, with the notion that the people that we work with are going to be the best people that we can find, as opposed to the people that may be the people that are the best connected or something of that nature. So given that, that's about all I am prepared to talk about right now with regards to board membership, other than I'm going to be, as soon as Scott's back from baby leave and Peter and Steve and I can sit down into a room, we'll be working this out, and I'd like to get it done sooner rather than later, So.
Something like a date. When do you think Scott will be back?
I don't know how much leave he's taking. I wouldn't expect he's.
I think it's 4 weeks.
He's taking 4 weeks. So, and of that time, he's probably going to be in and out. So, I mean, there's probably some email conversations that we can do and things like that. In the meantime, however, I would expect probably, I'd hope to have something codified by October. I would hope.
That means by October, we individually will be hearing from you as to whether we remain on or.
I mean, that's the ultimate goal. And I don't see a whole lot of there's some degree of discussion that needs to go on, but I mean, it's not something that's going to cause undue agony to any of us to get this thing done. So once we actually get people down, sit down, say, look, are we still committed to having the board?
Yeah, that was actually my first.
We are. I mean, at this point.
I think definitely.
Yeah, I do too. I mean, there's.
I thought the surprise you were going to spring on us is that
You're all gone. Yeah. No. No.
folks.
At this point,
You wish.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. The part.
Thought about leaving in a room and letting them vote somebody off.
Exactly. You got the survivor.
I talked about that.
Yeah. Exactly. Guess. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Yeah. Survivor.
Or apprentice.
Or apprentice. That's right. I could just walk in and and put you guys in the teams and then trump one of you and just you again. So no, but the problem that we're running into here now is we're just starting to hit our stride with regards to the types of feedback and you can probably sense from I've received sort of individual comments from the rest of you. It's like, all right, I can see where sort of the light bulb is going on across the company in a variety of different areas, and we're getting good feedback as a result of that. And there's this feedback loop that is starting to take place that is being recognized by, I mean, we talked earlier about Alchin. The fact that he said, don't cut it off at Nash's level anymore. I want to see this stuff. That is a victory as far as I'm concerned. Rick Rashid wants to see this kind of stuff. I mean, so people at higher echelons are wanting to see interaction here. So I don't, the board, as far as I'm concerned, is golden. I don't think anyone's going to touch it. I know Scott feels the same way, and I don't. Steve, Steve's 50-50. But
Steve's pretty flaky.
Yeah, exactly. It depends on the day, but. In any case, though, yeah, the board is going to exist in some way, shape, or form. That's the long and the short of it. There's not going to be, we're still going to maintain. It's my understanding we're still going to maintain, both a technological and a policy/legal mixture. I mean, again, we still sort of go back and forth on whether or not is it the best model to have everyone in the room at the same time. I think there is something to be said for having, people bouncing ideas back and forth, and it sort of catalyzes other, areas of thought and things of that nature. But, I'd be willing to entertain other suggestions if you, as the board, have thoughts about alternative methods for interaction. So, that Steve, you got anything, above and beyond, or any burning questions or people you want to see gone, or things like that?
I did have one.
One person you wanted to see gone, and who was that?
Well, that too. But no, actually, the thing that was absent from the feedback, or maybe I just had kind of in my brain cells, was any comment on the IE discussion. Is there any feedback? I mean, I know the reaction was positive when we did. Any feedback on that?
We talked about the fact that architecture is an ill-defined term.
Yeah.
So that was an architecture presentation.
But was that going? You see, when you said that, I didn't know whether we were talking about trustworthy
I was wondering
assurance.
if that was what you meant, or whether you were talking about trustworthy assurance, or were you talking about the red green.
Board.
Well,
First
sure.
presentation we heard about, we actually saw a picture of a security architecture. Second presentation we heard about trustworthy assurance with respect to architecture. Third presentation was info card. Everything's flexible. That's the architecture, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So,
But you want specific.
and then when we asked him what architecture is, he said it's a set of rules.
No, you're right.
Let me be more specific. I mean, I like the IE presentation and the restructuring that was done at the code level to do things like factoring out the URL parsers, all very good, very solid. Stepping back from the 50,000-foot level, you say, okay, what's the big picture in terms of the interaction of these various components with the outside world, and what are those interfaces? And that, to me, is the architecture that was still not manifest and necessarily even being thought about as a leverage point for attaching exactly these kinds of reference monitors or other things that might,
Well, to that end, I would say again. I mean, I sort of preach it, and you're all fairly good about making sure that you get your commentary to me. Please do. I mean, because there's context. We get Fred's sort of synopsis saying, generally here were the good points and here were the not so good points. But it's the context that I take and forward on to Paul England or Rob or whomever, that's going to give them, if we do need to bring them back. I mean, for example, we want to bring the InfoCards guys back. They're going to want to know if there were warts on the presentation. Well, then how should we, if we don't even know there are warts, how do we address them? So I would very definitely encourage, fire them to me, fire them, make them known, and I will make sure that they get forwarded accordingly. So
to answer Steve's question, I personally found the IE thing droned on and on and on forever, and there was only about 20 minutes worth of content. That said, I mean, they were obviously trying to undo what they did last time and give us a very careful analysis. What I didn't like last time was the lack of ideas. And I can tell you what the idea is now. It's doing this integrity label stuff. Okay, so that's 10 minutes worth of content, and that's the new idea. And if they had said that and had then explained to me how that pervades the whole picture, rather than giving this long list of threats and so on, it would have been a more efficient presentation. But nobody is upset about where IE is going. It seems like it's on track to be a much better thing, and the question is where else these ideas can have value in the company.
Also,
and please don't make him come back again.
Also, addressing the same issue, it seemed to me during the presentation that the MIG was applied rather selectively to bits and pieces of IE, and that's not going to work. I mean, either you apply the model to the entire subsystem, or if you do it selectively, you do it only to patch things. So it looks like it's a the presentation was a rather glorified penetrate and patch type activity as opposed to a uniform application of the model, whatever that is, to the entire thing. Also, we are talking about the BIBA model, the weak version of the weak BIBA model is the model also controls reads, not just writes, and so he didn't. My impression is I talked to him afterwards a little bit, and he didn't have a good story as to why reads are unimportant to integrity.
Program integrity doesn't control reads as well as writes. Strict integrity does. We probably take this off my program integrity doesn't. Strict integrity does, and the reason is because everything is right.
We can go back to it, but I'm not referring to a strong model that clearly controls information flow. But the problem is that if you want to talk about integrity, you have to prevent contamination. And contamination is not done only by writes, it's also done by reading bad data. So you contaminate yourself by reading bad data. So there is, I think there is more to this story than he presented to us, both in terms of model and in terms of uniform application.
Okay, bye. I still think
Yeah, okay.
Bet, Steve.
That's right. There we go, bet pink slips.
Right.
All right, well, given that, are there any other things that, well, one other thing from a housekeeping perspective, again, you now know the dates for TechFest, whether we front load for TechFest or back load. The sooner we figure that out, I'll send out a piece of email saying, okay, folks, here's the options. Tell me what you think. Mob rules. So.
But only if you remain on the board.
Exactly. That's right. That's right. If not.
If you don't get the email.
Yeah. Exactly. Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, in any case, but yeah, I'll be sending out some mail here at some point to selected folks to let them know what the scoop is. But in any case, be thinking about that, and obviously, to make your schedules a little bit more easy to deal with, that we'll do that sooner rather than later. So, all right. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? Very good. Break.